Hello everyone, welcome back to A Wild Approach. My name is Macy Lou, and in today's video we are going to be talking about container gardens. So I like to start off my videos, for the most part now, by saying that I garden in East Tennessee. So when I talk about native plants specifically, I am usually talking about the Southeast, the Northeast, or the Midwest, and just that general part of the United States. I usually do not cover the western half of the United States. Sometimes I do, sometimes there's overlap between what's native here and what's native there, but a lot of times, a lot of things are not going to be native to the western side of the United States. And here's a map so that you can see what general area I usually cover in my videos. And that's when we're talking about native plants specifically. But today's video some of these tips can actually be just used for general container gardening, but also I am going to dive into some native plants that you could use in your container garden. So when we dive into the native plant section of the video, that's when you're going to want to know what they're native to and where I live. So I live in East Tennessee, and let's jump into this video. Okay, so container gardens have been tricky for me ever since I started gardening because I just have always struggled with growing things in containers. I live on a hill, I live on a well-draining site, I live in the city. There's a lot of heat island effect where I live, there's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of heat bearing down. My house faces southeast, and so it's just, southwest. My house faces southwest. And it's just really hot. And so I think that contributes to issues with growing in containers. So if you have a really hot, dry site, just know that that's probably one of the more difficult sites to do a container garden. And so you just need to do a little bit more tender care to your plants. You might have to water, you will have to water quite a bit more. You'll have to be a little bit more nurturing to your plants than you would have to do in the ground, typically. But it also depends on what you're growing and what soil you're using and what pots you're using. And that's why I want to give you all some tips that I've learned so far. Because yes, I'm still learning how to do container gardening and it's still tough, but I have found some things that have worked really, really well and have helped me get better at container gardening and starting seedlings in pots, as well as growing actual container gardens where you keep the plant in the pot for more than just growing on. Alright, so I have 5 of my top tips right here, and let's dive in. So tip number 1 is to use containers that fit your situation and your site and that makes sense for you. So what I learned at my place is that terracotta is not usually going to be the best option for me. If I use terracotta pots on my hot patios in the full 6 or 8 hours of sun that I typically get on my surfaces, that is really, really, really hot. And that can dry out the soil very, very quickly. So when I add terracotta to the mix, a lot of times terracotta wicks the moisture out of the soil, and so if it's dry, it's going to be even drier. Like, it's just extra dry at that point. Whereas if I use plastic, which I know plastic is a very frustrating material to deal with because it takes forever to break down. But unfortunately, so far, plastic has been my favorite type of pot, and I hate to say that, but that's just how I feel, because I've tried to use ceramic pots and they crack in the winter, and I like to leave my pots exactly where they are. I don't want to have to put them in the garage, and especially since I use native plants, I just kind of want to leave them where they are so they can get the seasons, the full real seasons, and not be just tucked away. Hi guys, could you hit the like button underneath this video? It helps me know which videos resonate most with you guys. Do you need a short, quick guide to get started in wildlife gardening? Well, turns out I've got just the thing. I just came out with a new free ebook just for you, and it's called A Wild Approach to Gardening 101. And it's available on my website today at macylou.com/shop. It's free, so go check it out. What do you have to lose? Keep that in mind. You can do whatever you want. I just want to give you these tips because this is what I've learned, that ceramic and breakable pots are beautiful, and they're usually sturdy and strong and the best in that sense. But in the winter, if you like to leave your pots as is and you don't want to move them, if they're really heavy, for example, plastic is going to hold up better. It just is when it comes to wintertime. But there are certain things you could try if you do want to use the more breakable pots, and that is you can try burlap wrapping them, or you could, like I said, put them in a garage. And you might want to do a little bit more research and see, can it help to put it in an unheated garage, or does it have to be an attached heated garage? Because see, my garage is detached and is not heated. So really, the only thing it's going to do in the winter to protect my pots is just protect them from the actual surface frost, but it's not going to protect them from really cold temperatures. So when we dip down really, really low, it could still crack, right? So anyway, that's what I want to say about pots. I only really use the terracotta pots for very specific plants. For example, fame flower, that is a very drought tolerant, tough little plant that is sort of a desert like plant in a way, or a desert adjacent type plant. And so fame flower can, in my experience, handle the terracotta pot, whereas I haven't really found any other plant yet that's native that can handle terracotta. And my fame flower that I have, the specific species that I have, is technically not native to my exact area. It's more native a state over, I think, in Missouri maybe. So technically it's not exactly super local native. So it's probably more native to a drier, hotter area. So that kind of makes sense, right? That type of plant can handle that terracotta better, because of how dry the terracotta pots get. So just keep that in mind. Choose very carefully what pots you choose. And also, I do garden in a very sunny place, like I said, and so if you have a shady garden, you're gonna have so many more options. just letting you know, if you have a little bit more of a shady spot, or a part shade, part sun situation, you're probably going to have a lot more options, and you're probably going to have a lot less maintenance to deal with, because you're not going to have to necessarily baby them as much if they get a decent break from that blazing hot direct sun. So you might be able to kind of up your variety of pots a little bit in your garden if you have more shade, which is so fun and so cool. But my favorite is plastic, unfortunately. And some of my pots are recycled from, and when I say not really recycled, reused from the nursery. If I buy a really big plant from somewhere, and I just keep those big pots. And sometimes I buy really cheap $5 plastic wash tubs. I think they're either wash tubs or toy bins or laundry baskets. It's some kind of, I think it's a wash tub though, that you hand wash your clothes in. And they've been holding up really, 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 really well in my garden. The only thing is you need to remove the rope handles. I repeat, remove the rope handles, because they're plastic, and they're great at first for picking up your pot and moving it around. But over time they break down and they start to fall apart, and then all those plastic particles try to go everywhere, and that is not ideal at all. It's really, really annoying. And you don't want to disturb them if you accidentally have done that and just left them on your pot. You don't want to touch them then, because they'll just fall apart over the years. So that's the only caveat to that, is just take out those plasticky ropes from the rope handles from those tubs, those big tub pots. But other than that, they're pretty cheap. You can usually find them. I've found mine at Target, but you could probably find them. I don't know if you can find them at Walmart. I'm assuming something like that. But they're really cheap compared to the actual big, same size pots in the garden section, because that's what they're getting you for, right? They're like, oh, because they're getting a pot in the garden section, a big one for a big tree or something, or a shrub to go inside of or whatever, then they're gonna pay more money because it's like ornate and it's pretty and it's or it's actually an actual gardening pot, and that's what it's used for. So that's what, they know that they can charge you more for that, versus a wash tub that still has the same, the little number on the bottom of a plastic container. It has like the same number on the bottom, so like it's not that it's different plastic. It's not like it's a different kind of plastic. Anyway, it's just not as pretty. It's just plain. It might have lines on it, but it doesn't have like that ornate detail that might be on your actual garden pots. But anyway, that's the frugal side of me coming out, and I often try to be frugal with as much of this stuff as I can, to a point. But, for quality, if you want something that's going to last a really long time, then you're going to want to choose probably a different kind of material, and you're probably going to want to maintain it and seal it if it's something breakable, for example. And you're just going to want to do research on that, and I don't have enough information about that because that's just not what I do. So, moving on. Tip number 2. Okay, moving on. So, tip number 2 is put larger, heavier pots on wheels. Okay, so heavy pots, large pots, I'm just not the strongest girl in the world, okay? And I have scoliosis, so I'm not supposed to carry things that are too heavy around. I do have a garden wagon, but you still have to get it from the ground to the wagon. So these things can get really, really heavy. I like to use really large pots. And so these I like to put on wheels as much as possible. And I don't have all of them on wheels. This is going to be a gradual thing I do just to like stay within budget, is like, because the wheels can get expensive, because it's like a platform you sit your pot on, and that platform has wheels on the bottom so that you can move your pot around your garden. And when I say around your garden, I mean around your patio, around your driveway, because I actually use my driveway as a patio, right? So I think these wheeled platforms for pots are just a game changer. I mean, think about it. You know how in your house, you like to move the furniture around in your house? Well, this way you can move your container garden pots around, and you can rearrange them. Maybe they will look better in a different arrangement. It's just a game changer, and if you have back issues like I do, that's also a reason why it's a game changer. And it can add up and be really expensive, because they can run $15 to $35 or something, $15 to $35 a piece for each platform, just depending on what quality you get. But to me, it's worth it, and I just get like one in a blue moon, and so over time, hopefully all my pots will have wheels eventually. It's just going to take a while to like gradually build up the inventory of them. So, and I told you to use containers that fit your situation in tip 1, and in tip 2 I said put your larger, heavier pots on wheels. And that probably makes you ask the question what size pots to use. And I use mostly large pots, because I've found that like medium pots and small pots are just not great for a permanent container garden, because things just run out of, they dry up so fast, things run out of nutrients so quickly, and it just isn't really worth it to me. The small and medium pots, to me, are better for temporary starting of plants. So like seed starting. You start your seeds, and you might want to start them outside in flats or small pots or medium pots. And I prefer the medium, because the bigger the better for me. Even the large pots, sometimes that's where I start my seeds. It just depends. But that being said, no matter what we're talking about here, the main point is that the larger your pot is, the more it's going to hold on to moisture better, which means your plant's going to usually be happier because you're not going to have to water as often. You're not going to have to worry about drought as often. And yeah, because like some of the smaller pots, you might have to water every single day or twice a day. Some people have said to me that they water theirs like twice a day, the small pots. And I'm just like, I just don't got time for that. Like, I just don't. I would rather use a large pot. But that being said, in tip number 4, I'm going to talk about soil. So I'm going to wait till I get to that one. But there's a reason that the large pots can get expensive in other ways, and that's soil. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because tip number 3 is fertilizing. Okay, so when I first started container gardening, I did not fertilize anything because I was like, they're native plants, they don't need fertilizer. And then I read a book about starting native plants from seed, and they used fertilizer in their pots, in their flats, and I was like, oh, no wonder I'm struggling. It's because I'm not fertilizing them. So that's when I found out that just because they're native plants does not mean they don't need fertilizer when they're grown in pots. Now, in the ground, they shouldn't need fertilizer. If they're planted in the right environment, they should not need fertilizer if they're grown directly in the garden, directly in the ground. Because if you've chosen the right plants for the right place, then they should just naturally fit the site. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to that in that a lot of our yards are not really the original soil because of when they built the house, it's like they took the soil, they dug it under, like several feet under, and then they just it's like they put it in a blender and then just spat it back out, and then you get what you get wherever you get it. And to me, that's not really native soil anymore, but it's as close as we can get because I don't know how we would fix that without just adding things to the soil, rather than trying to unblend and spit out the soil that's already been dug up and moved around. And, when they build houses, they really disturb the soil in such a deep way. I don't even think we always necessarily think about that. And so, yeah, it's native soil, but is it really original native soil? That's the way it's supposed to be, with the right layers in the right places? Could be, could not be. Mine is all over the map. So I mean, to be fair, when I did traditional gardening, I added things to the soil. So I used to do mushroom compost, I used to do manure, I used to do lots of mulches. Back before I knew we shouldn't be using dyed mulches, I used dyed mulches. I have used so many things on the soil back before I really got into native plants and before I understood that it's better to just try to just not add too much to the soil and just see what native plants actually fit that soil. But of course I wasn't doing native plants back then, so there was this transition phase where I was starting to do more native plants, but I was still adding compost and stuff on top of the soil, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just you shouldn't have to if the plants you're picking actually fit your site. But I digress. There's so much. It's so tricky though, because again, when they build a house, they churn the soil all up, and is it actually what the plants need? Even native plants, is it actually what the native plants need? But I digress. I'm getting into the weeds here. Tip number 3, like I said, is fertilize. So yeah, you're not technically supposed to have to fertilize directly in the ground because there should be enough nutrients, hopefully, for your native plants, typically, in general. But in pots, that is far from the case. Nutrients are going to deplete pretty quickly, quicker than I expected, actually. And so you do need to fertilize. Now, it depends on what fertilizer you use. That is going to dictate how often you fertilize. So just follow the instructions if there are instructions with your fertilizer. I like to use organic fertilizer, but you look into that, see what's right for you, because some people use synthetic fertilizers, even for native plants, if they're in containers. And then some people use organic. So I'm just going to let you obviously it's your life. You do what you want. For now, I'm using organic fertilizers just in case, just to try to play it on the safe side. But I understand that just because something's organic doesn't mean it's, perfect. And just because something's natural doesn't mean it's good. You get it. But the point is for now, that's what I'm using. And typically what I do is I fertilize my seedling pots and things, and even the big pots where I've planted seeds in spring. So just spring in general. I don't do it in the winter, and I don't do it in the summer. I focus on spring. So I will plant the seeds, and then I don't really fertilize at that time in the soil, in the potting soil of the pots. And then I will wait until spring starts. And then I see, are they germinating? And once I have some germination and they get a few little leaves on them, then I start fertilizing. And I fertilize, I follow the directions, but I fertilize very weakly. And then, and when I say weekly, I mean weakly, a very weak amount of fertilizer. I just want them to get a touch of fertilizer. And I use a liquid organic fertilizer. I might change what I use because I just kind of want to experiment and see if there's anything better out there. But I do that in the spring, and I typically will do it once a week for a while, when spring really starts to come in and they're germinated and the plants are not only germinated, but they're starting to try to grow. That's when I'm really amping up the fertilizing. And when I mean amping up, I just mean once a week. And that's typically what I do. And if I miss a week, I don't freak out about it. I don't worry about it. And I just make sure I don't miss the next week, So I just do it once a week, and I do a very small weak amount, and I dilute it in water. So I use a little water pitcher. But anyway, that's how I do it, following the directions on the bottle. And I just like liquid fertilizer better. That's just my preference, but there are other types you can use. And once it gets hot, late spring, early summer, I stop fertilizing. Do your own research and see what's right for you. But from what I've seen, a lot of other gardeners that have been professional gardeners or have been in nurseries their whole life, they talk about when it gets hot in the summer, slow down your fertilizing or stop fertilizing. So that's what I do, because by then, typically the plants are either really, really lush by that point, or they're even flowering by that point. So I usually don't have to really fertilize them anyway at that point. They're already growing so lushly if they're in big enough pots. And I say that if they're in big enough pots, because again, if they're in medium or small pots, they're not really, in my garden at least, they don't really get that lush. They might not even flower. And so, this is why I moved over to mostly really large pots. And I mean big, big pots. Because I just don't think that the small and mediums really the plants don't look as good. They just look like seedlings to me. So I would rather just use the small and medium for starting the seeds and then putting them in the ground. And then use the bigger pots for that, but also permanent container garden, and which is so fun to me. Okay, tip number 4, because I am talking way too much in this video, but tip number 4 is the soil is important, and you want to use potting soil, not topsoil. You don't want to use your soil from your garden. You would think you could because it's native plants, but I've tried it. It does not work. For whatever reason, it does not work. It's at least my soil that's in my ground, when I put it in a pot, it turns into a rock almost. It's just not good. So you've got to use potting soil. unfortunately. And I have a favorite, and I'm not sponsored, but I am going to tell you my favorite potting soil. It's the Happy Frog Organic Potting Soil by Fox Farm, but I'm not sponsored. But this doesn't mean this is the best soil. I've seen people do experiments where they're like, oh, well, this soil isn't actually that much better than such and such soil. And okay, but so far, this is my favorite that I've used. And if I find a better one, I'll switch. But so far, this is the best one that I have had so far. And I'm sure there's something better out there. But anyways, the potting soil is extremely important. And so is the fertilizer, and so is the water. So when it comes to your potting soil, try to find something organic if you can. Some people don't, so that's no judgment. If the organic ones that you're using are just terrible, then you might have to use something that's not organic. Totally understandable. Because we're kind of limited to what is in stock nearby. Because, I mean, it's kind of hard to buy this kind of thing online because the bags are so heavy. And shipping could be expensive, or they might not even offer them online. It just depends on what you're getting. Because I usually get like a big bag. So I usually have to buy these things in person. And sometimes I have to drive a ways away to find it. Especially finding my favorite potting soil. So, no judgment if you have to use a potting soil that you kind of didn't want to use. Because I've seen professionals using potting soil you wouldn't expect them to be using. And that's when my eyes were opened and I was like, okay, so I shouldn't be so strict on like what potting soil I'm using. And I shouldn't freak out if it's not like the perfect, like, end all be all organic times a million or whatever. I'm sounding a little silly now, but I think you know what I mean. Try not to let it devastate you if you can't find the same soil that I use. That's all I'm saying. Just use the best thing you can find for your budget, because some of these soils are way more expensive than others. But I will say that, like, I tried the Ace Hardware, no shade, I love Ace Hardware soil, topsoil specifically for my pond. But I tried the Ace Hardware potting soil and I just didn't like it. I can't get things to grow in it. It could be my fault. It could be the fertilization situation because I stopped fertilizing since it's so hot. And maybe I planted the seeds too late and they needed that fertilization. So maybe I should have planted them earlier in the spring. They're an annual. They're not native, the things I'm trying to grow in that. So, could be my fault, but so far I don't love the Ace Hardware potting soil. And again, it could just be on me and the timing. But compared to the Happy Frog, it's like night and day for me. So Happy Frog just gets all my love. But I also, use the Fox Farm liquid organic fertilizer. So together, I just love that combination so far. It's just been working really good for me. But again, it could be better. Could be much better. So, if you've got something that you like better, use that. All right. Tip number 5 is to choose plants that can take drought for best results. Because when things are in pots, they're raised up. They're not in the ground, surrounded and protected by a bunch of soil that goes for miles and miles and miles, right? It is an isolated chunk of soil above the ground, okay? In a pot. So think about that for a minute. It's going to be well drained. Just like my garden is well drained because it's on a hill, your pot's well drained because it's up, raised up above everything with not a lot of protection on the sides, okay? So your best bet is to choose drought-tolerant plants, whether you're gardening in the sun or the shade. So if you're gardening in the shade, you're going to want to choose shade-loving, drought-tolerant plants. And if you're in the sun, you're going to want to choose plants that are really tolerant to hot heat, lots of sun, and drought as well. And what are the plants that I suggest? Well, there are a lot of plants you could choose, but for now I'm just going to tell you 10 plants. 5 of them I have tried firsthand and can tell you for sure that they work in pots, in my experience at least, and in my garden at least. And they are tough plants. Those are 5 plants I'm going to talk about. And then after that, I'm going to talk about 5 plants that you could try in a pot that I haven't actually tried in a pot yet, but from what I've seen, some of them in my own garden, some of them in other gardens, and some of them just reading about them online, they sound like something that's got some good container gardening potential. So first of all, let's talk about the top 5 native plants that I love to put in pots and container gardens, and that I have actually done in real life firsthand. And number 1 is lance leaf coreopsis. I can't speak enough about how much I love lance leaf coreopsis. It is a bright, sunny yellow of a flower, and it is so cheerful, it's so beautiful, and it is tough. It's tough, it's drought tolerant, and you can deadhead it so that it'll bring up more blooms again. So if you don't want to collect the seeds that year, just deadhead it and it'll flower for you again. Lovely plant. This is probably the first native plant that I grew in a pot, and it was a complete accident because it like reseeded itself from my garden into a pot, and then it just lived for years and years and years in the same pot. Barely ever watered it, never fertilized it back then. I would fertilize it these days in the spring because then it would perform better, but back then when I was just learning and it was a complete accident, it was just like doing its thing, and it was fine. Plant number 2 is anise hyssop. This is a plant that's new to me. It's technically, I don't think it's native to my county, or it might not even be native to my state, but it's native like north of me. So it's going to be native for a lot of you probably that are watching, and it is anise hyssop, and it's got these really pretty spike-like purple flowers that hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees love. And even though it's new to me, it's flowering in my pot right now, and it's doing so well. So I highly recommend it. And number 3 is fame flower. Fame flower there's a lot of different species of fame flower, but in general, fame flower is like, I think it's like a succulent type plant, and it's very, very drought tolerant. And after about 4 p.m. Eastern time, at least, it will bloom around that time for a couple hours, and then it'll close back up. So it's closed in the morning, it'll open up in the evening, and then it'll close back up again. Or sorry, afternoon. It'll open in the afternoon and then close back up in the evening. And plant number 4 is violets. Just your standard native ground cover violets. I've had some good luck with them in pots underneath bigger plants, like underneath my cherry tree that I have in a pot, underneath some native grasses or something. Like it's a pretty good little ground cover for your pots. Plant number 5 that I've used in my garden and a container is switchgrass. Switchgrass is fantastic. I can't speak about it enough. In your garden, it will get probably as tall as you, but in a pot, it stays shorter, like maybe 2 feet tall. And it weaves over in just this beautiful display. Now, to be fair, in my pot currently, it's a little yellowy instead of like a vibrant green. So it may be wanting some fertilizer or nutrients or something. It's a little bit like, uh-oh. But other than that, it looks beautiful and it's gorgeous and doing great. So those are 5 that I've experienced firsthand that have done great in my hot, sunny patio area in containers. Now keep in mind, all of these are either in, actually the lance leaf coreopsis, anise hyssop, and the violets, and the lance leaf coreopsis, anise hyssop, and the violets are in large pots. The fame flower is in a smaller, kind of medium to small pot, and the switchgrass is in a medium-sized pot. The switchgrass is in a medium-sized pot that is also self-watering, meaning it has a reservoir at the bottom of the pot that will contain water so that it can wick it up when needed. So when you water it, it fills that reservoir back up, and it kind of holds onto it until the plant needs it. So that one's in a self-watering pot like that. Just for information. All right, so let's move on to the native plants that are worth a try. So these are plants that I've either grown in the ground, or I've seen in other people's gardens, or I've seen in other people's potted gardens and container gardens, or I've just seen around the internet that are pretty drought tolerant or appear to be pretty drought tolerant so far. And in other words, I can't guarantee that these are going to love being in pots, but from what I've seen so far, they seem to be pretty intriguing contenders that I plan to try to put in pots, and I think you should try it too. So number one is Phlox Amina. Phlox Amina is one of my new favorite plants of all time. I know that sounds like, wow, she's really dramatic about that, but no, Phlox Amina is so beautiful. It gets these really pretty pink blooms. It's really short. It's drought tolerant. It is tough as nails. It can handle that really hot, exposed, kind of barren looking soil that's like, that soil that's like clay, but it's like hard and it's like not much is growing in it. So uh-oh, this is a tough spot. So far, it's handling spots like that for me pretty well. It is a phlox, so I haven't actually seen like swallowtails using mine yet, but I'm hoping that over the years, as I add more of this plant, they'll see it from the air and be like, oh yay, I'm gonna go down and get some of that. I just don't think I have enough of it yet to catch their eye, but Phlox Amina is gorgeous, and if you love phlox but you want another short one that can handle drought, try this one. It is also called hairy phlox, but Phlox Amina, I just think the name is so cute, so I just use the scientific name. And I plan to try to put some of these in pots eventually. I actually want more in the ground too, because I just want more of it in general. But it stays fairly short compared to a lot of native plants. So I don't know. It's one of my top favorite plants right now. Okay, plant number 2 you should try to grow in your container garden is verbena. There are native verbenas that you can try, and there is one called Homestead Purple Verbena, and it is a cultivar, and it is a short-lived perennial, so that part stinks that it's short-lived, but the swallowtails freaking love this plant. So if you love swallowtail butterflies, maybe just invest in some of this Homestead Purple Verbena or the straight species of it. It's basically just your native short verbenas. Yeah, get some of those and try them in pots, because most of the time they're pretty drought tolerant. Some of the straight species, my understanding is they grow in like barrens and glades and things like that. So try that. See if it can grow on pots and report back to me. I used to grow it in the ground, and I grew it also in my really hot raised bed garden out back, and that is basically like growing things in a pot because it's just so hot and dry up there. The retaining wall garden is brutal. It's probably the most brutal spot in my garden, and it didn't skip a beat back there really. It did great. So, highly recommend it. Try it in pots, see how it goes. Plants, number 3, it's kind of a combo. It's kind of a generality, but goldenrods and asters. Specifically, drought-tolerant goldenrods and asters. And try to get the shorter ones. So, like, there's shorter goldenrods you can get, and there are some asters that are a little bit shorter. But with the asters, even if they're taller, you might be able to trim them back a little bit and make them work in a pot, make them look okay in a pot. I just think that, like, it's pretty cool to add these late bloomers in there for the butterflies, so when they're, especially monarchs, when they're migrating, they'll have something to eat. All right, plant number 4 to try in a container garden is nodding onion. Nodding onion is not only a gorgeous plant, but it's supposed to be pretty tough. I actually don't have this plant yet, so I don't really know for sure, but from everything I've read, it's a tough plant and it can handle some drought, and it's really pretty. So try that one in a pot, see how that goes. And last but not least, Number 5, little blue stem. I read online that little blue stem can handle being in a pot. And little blue stem is beautiful. I've grown it at the front of my property, and I love the seed heads. I had some unfortunate things happen with mine, but basically non-native grass infiltrated it and kind of ruined the planting. But when it works well, it's beautiful. And I feel like growing it in a pot would make it easier to keep an eye on it, make it easier to make sure that those non-native grasses aren't infiltrating it. Because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I struggle to see grasses and identify between them. It's like I'm grass species blind. I don't know how else to describe that. You know, some people are like plant blind and they don't, like, all plants just kind of look the same to them. I'm kind of like that with grasses. So I'm really struggling to identify native grasses. So I'm trying to grow some native grasses, and what happens is like, if it has its seed head on it, I'm good. But if it doesn't have its seed head on it and it's like kind of young in its growing process, I'm like, I don't know what you are. Are you good? Are you native? Are you invasive? Like, which are you? So anyway, that is my video on container gardening. If you have container gardening tips of your own, please leave them in the comments down below. Let me know. And, oh, bonus tip. I actually forgot to put this in my list. But one other important thing to note is if you recycle soil, if you recycle potting soil like I do, you're going to be in a world of trouble because you're going to get all kinds of seeds in there, okay? From your native plants, from your non-native plants, from invasive plants, like everything in the world that you could think of is going to just pop up in your recycled potting soil. So, you know, frugal me wanted to recycle soil, and I still do. But I think this bonus tip would be have at least two different big pots going at the same time. Have one big pot that's fresh, new, completely brand new, your favorite potting soil that you bought. And then have another pot that's recycled soil that you've used over the years. And just see the difference, because I think you're going to see a lot less weeds in your brand new potting soil pot, and you're going to see a lot more weeds, a lot more random stuff coming up in the recycled soil pot. And I know that sounds like a duh moment, and that sounds like, well, of course you will, because your recycled soil has a seed bank, because even though it's not in the ground, it's creating its own seed bank because things are getting blown into it from the wind and from the plants themselves that used to grow in the pot, and on and on and on and on. So it's kind of a duh on my part, but I did want to add that because I've talked in the past about how I recycle soil, and I did want to update you guys that, yeah, it's kind of annoying because then you have a bunch of random things coming up, and a lot of them might be native, but what if they're natives that you already have a bunch of and you don't want any more of? Then you might just need to give them away to friends. But if they're growing in the middle of all your other plants you're trying to grow on purpose and competing with them, it can be annoying. So if you have the budget for it, buy some new soil, and every year buy at least one big large pot worth of potting soil if you can afford to, and start your seeds in there if you get confused like I do. And if you get a lot of seeds like I do, because I let pretty much everything reseed itself, and because of that, I get a lot of surprises. Some of the surprises are good. Some of the surprises I get so excited about, but some of the surprises I'm like, this is giving me maintenance now, because I will have to go over there and I'll to pluck all these weeds out of the pots. Because yes, your potted plants will also need to be weeded. But especially if you recycle soil at all. Anyway, thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. I have lots of plans coming up for garden tours, pond updates, and other butterfly gardening tips. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone. Hey guys, don't forget to follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. These are the two best social media accounts other than YouTube where you can find me and you can see me post photos of the garden, thoughts on wildlife, and more. So don't forget to follow me over there. Brand new items are now available in the shop. Thanks so much to viewers like you for supporting the channel. To support the channel, like the video, comment, and subscribe. You can also support my work by buying art from me at macylu.com. Thanks for watching!